It's a pleasure and honor to welcome Professor Ranjini Majumdar to this conversation series that we have at Asim Premji University. For those who are in film studies or largely interested in cinema in India, Ranjini Majumdar perhaps doesn't need much of an introduction. But for the uninitiated, Professor Ranjini Majumdar is Professor of Cinema Studies at the School of Arts and Aesthetics in Jawaharlal Nehru University. In fact, she is one of the founding faculty members of the program at the university. Her work cuts across various aspects of the Indian film industry, but with a focus on popular cinema, Bombay in particular, urban studies, technology, aesthetics, and a variety of other themes that she has explored over the years. Her book titled Bombay Cinema, an Archive of the City, has been very important in shifting uh, the dominant perspectives in Indian film studies till then. Since then, she has written a lot on Indian cinema in general and particularly on Hindi cinema. So, welcome Ranjini to this series. So, Ranjini, I wanted to begin by asking something about your first book on Bombay cinema, which was really important in shifting from the then existing dominant frameworks of nationalist cinema and bring certain new perspectives, such as urban studies, such as thinking of cinema as a kind of spatial practice, and also as a very located industry. And there is a lot of work that is, that this particular framework has generated. So it would be really interesting if you could give a sense of, how you started doing that work and the ensuing themes and methodology and so on.
Thank you, Bindu, for hosting this event today and having a conversation with me. I just wanted to start by saying that, this book, my first book, came out of my PhD. And there was a break during my PhD years. I finished coursework in 92 and came back to India. And I was making documentaries at that time. And then I returned in 1998 to complete my PhD with a fresh proposal. Prior to that, my project was going to be about gender and the nation. And thank God for the 5-year break. I could break from that theme and then went headlong into the city. And I developed this project because at that time there was a lot of churning in the world in the wake of globalization, a lot of literature on the city and suppressed histories of cinema's relationship to urban life and the city had started to emerge all over the world. New translations of Walter Benjamin's writings and all had started to come. So there was a general interest in the city. And in the Indian context, because of our history of the national movement and because of a kind of Gandhian focus on the village as the site of conflict, even though nationalist mobilization was taking place in urban spaces, the city has not had the same kind of focus in academic literature in the other disciplines. So for me, this was like open ground. And in Delhi at that time, an organization called Sarai was emerging. They were also very interested in the city. So I emerged in the context of a large number of people wanting to ask new type of questions. And for me, that moment was very important. I actually emerged from a moment. It didn't just emerge from my own being, but it was a context that allowed me to articulate something different and new. And over the years, I've realized that it intersected also with the fact that I was a student of geography as an undergraduate. So space as a category was always very, very important for me. So at that time, I developed this project on the relationship between cinema and the city. And I wanted to get away from nationalist frameworks. Uh, which basically was a way of reading images with the nation form as the dominant framing narrative. So you read everything on screen as if it was speaking to a national context. But I was more interested in the gritty urban life. And I was interested in what young cinephile filmmakers were doing at that time. We remember that this is the period when I was writing my PhD. It was a different era. Ram Gopal Verma had arrived in Bombay. He was trying to make different kinds of films. Lots of people from all across the country had arrived in Bombay. And there was some hope of a different kind of cinema, which was influenced by a cinephilic culture. They were very astute about form, and they were interested in a kind of cinema which was both documenting urban life and at the same time speaking to a global context of what was happening in world cinema. They also wanted to speak to a world beyond India. And so that kind of conversation was also very important. And I saw, I remember I saw Satya in New York. When I was writing my PhD, I saw Satya there. And, we had not seen a Bombay film like that. And so that's how it developed. And my project developed as a result of all these things that happened around me. Globalization, new questions being raised about the city, and a new group of filmmakers who wanted to move against the grain of what they had seen or perceived to be the dominant language of cinema. But I wasn't part of the oppositional culture in the sense that I was as fond of popular cinema as I was of the new kinds of cinema that was emerging at that time. Because I think that you can't have one type of cinema. There are different kinds of cinemas and we have to engage with everything. And so in my book, it really is about the popular. And I begin with the 1970s and look at the Amitabh Bachchan moment, and that chapter ends with Bazigar and what happens to the hero and the transformation. I was looking at questions of sexuality and the city, and that was also in response to the arrival of cable television at that time and how it transformed the ways in which women were depicted on screen. I looked at, urban figures like the Tapori who drew on the Bombaya language with that swagger and arrogance.
Amir Khan character and
So Rangila, Gulam were very important in that chapter. And I also, my last two chapters were looking at gangster films. One chapter was on, two of them were Ram Gopal Verma films, and one was Vidhu Vinod Chopra's Parinda. And the last chapter was called The Panoramic Interior, which was about the rise of the Karan Johar, Yash Chopra style of filmmaking in which the city is erased.
Right.
Because they go into these lavish interiors. So in that sense, the book was really topical in the sense that it was responding to events and transformations that were taking place at that time in the country, in the city of Bombay, in the discipline of cinema studies. So all these layers played a role.
Right. So since then, you have stayed with questions of the city, of the industry, of cinema, both historically and contemporary. So just wondering, what are the kind of concepts and frameworks that, what are the ideas that you would like to revisit, in that backdrop of this long history of working on these themes?
So I think the question of urban space was important in my first book, and Bombay was also important in my book. And it was, I feel now when I look back at that book that the theme of architecture, cartography, how to develop a cartographic approach to understanding cinema, and technology,
Right.
they were not addressed in the same way because I was not thinking about thinking about these issues at the same level. So as time went by and I started teaching, we set up JNU and I started teaching a course on cinema in the city where I was teaching films from all around the world, from Latin America to Africa to Europe and India. In that course, I sort of developed a wider set of readings. And it slowly dawned on me over a period of time. And that's how ideas developed, that the technological question was very important and that really needed to be addressed. And I think what has happened is that I wrote the book at the time when the digital is there on the horizon, but hasn't really taken over cinema in the way it has now. And today, the digital has come to define so many things. And if I look at these two moments between the analog and the digital and all that has changed, the relationship between technology, aesthetics, and space, this is very important for me now. And it's what marks cinema as different from literature and from the other arts to some extent. Because the technological, how to think about the relationship between technology and aesthetics is important. And the other thing that I wanted to address, and that was also important, is the question of infrastructure. Whether we think about it in terms of industrial infrastructure that makes things possible, because new types of exhibition emerged at that time. The multiplexes arrived. This changed exhibition strategies. Filmmakers could try to actually get a film released, and with DVD rights and music rights, they could get back money. So that opened the space for new types of filmmaking at that time. So I think the media infrastructure, the exhibition infrastructure, these are issues that have become more and more important for me over the years. And in my teaching also, I address this question of the relationship between space and technology and aesthetics much more. And I think that is the direction that led me to my, I have continued to write on cinema and cartography, which is basically cartography is all about, if you think about it subjectively, it's a mapping impulse. And the camera maps space.
Right.
And so the mapping impulse makes cinema the most powerful medium through which you can capture urban life, because it maps, it walks with people, it travels by train, it can create that kind of dynamism to capture this kind of urban life. So in the writings between the first book and now, I have done a lot of this kind of atmospheric work linked to thinking about cartography and thinking about the images as something that emerges through a sedimented form. It's layers and layers and layers of different kinds of things. And though my last chapter, The Panoramic Interior, dealt with production design and art direction, it should have been there through the book. It wasn't. So now I am very much more conscious of sound, of color, of production design, because I feel the image cannot be seen unless you keep all these things in mind.
Right. So what is the current project after all this years?
So my current work, it actually for a long time after my book came out and I was still doing urban work on the city and cinema, I wrote a lot of articles and all, and I was in a fix about what to do. And then I realized that my first project was a comfort zone, because it was about the cinema that I had grown up with and was living with. It was the present, the contemporary. And I wanted to do something that I had not grown up with, so that my instincts were different. So I decided, first, initially, I wanted to do some work on the 50s. And I started by doing some research on the Navketan films. I wrote an article on that. I went and met the people at Navketan Studios to see if they had any archival material or all. And then it soon dawned on me that going to the 50s means staying very close to independence, and the national was overwhelmingly present. And I just did not want to go in that direction. So my interest was always more in the crime films. I was interested in the Navketan films. I was interested in Vijay Anand's work. I was interested in Guru Dutt's crime films. I was Raj Khosla, all the filmmakers who were trying to make a kind of cosmopolitan form emerge in relation to everyday life in the city. But I decided that was it. I don't think that I can go into the 50s, because then I would be questioned on why I was not taking all the other things into account, and other people have done good work on that. So then I decided I would do work on the 60s, the decade that everyone has trashed as escapist fare and nonsensical cinema. I said, I want this as a challenge, so I want to work on this. So I started doing research, and I was trying to think about the 60s in the context of the global 60s, what it meant, the global 60s churning. Was there any relationship between the cinema here and what was happening all over the world in the 60s? So I started doing archival work. I did some work in the US libraries. I did work in Bombay. I did some archival work at the National Film Archive in Pune. I did some of this archival work. And then it was only during the research that I stumbled upon color. And then I realized that hardly anything written on color, not just in India or globally, hardly anything had been written much. Some people who had addressed it. So, and we also started using color quite late, because there was no film stock that was produced in India. It had to be imported. So I stumbled upon color. And then once I stumbled upon color, I realized that here was my opportunity to frame the technological question via color and the relationship between infrastructure, technology, and aesthetics. And that's how my book project emerged. And I've done sort of worked on this for the last 10 years. Book should have been out by now, but I've also been teaching and doing other things. So now I'm in the process of writing the book, and hopefully by the end of the year, I'll be able to submit it. And in this book, I look at color as technology, as a material form, as aesthetics, and as something that reorganized the industry and the economy.
Right.
Because it was something that had to be imported. And this was the period in the 60s where quotas were released by the government, and you had to pay in foreign exchange. And we are talking about a decade of serious foreign exchange crisis. So the industry had to completely shift gear. And it is with color that Kashmir arrives on screen in the way it does.
Right.
And that's how the project, started to become about space. And until the 60s, Indians had not seen India. Because most shooting was done in studio spaces. At the most, they would go out into the city and one or two, because they were dealing with those heavy Mitchell cameras.
Right.
And that put some restrictions on what you could do. So it's with color that the travel form begins.
Right.
And the camera moves with sound. The new technologies of sound have also arrived around this time. So once the camera moves, India is being unveiled. So it is that period when Indians start seeing India for the first time. And the protagonists in all these films are no longer just the stars. Kashmir is a major protagonist.
Right.
The hill stations are protagonists. The way in which the landscape of India is captured, they are all protagonists. The camera also goes outside the country to global cities. And that's the first encounter that South Asians have with global cities on screen. So it's a whole different world that starts to emerge. And Helen, who was largely presented as an Asian figure in the black and white era, turns blonde haired, blue eyed, and becomes this dancer because of color. So then I realized that I could then think about this relationship in a wider sort of way. And that's how this book has emerged. It's going to emerge.
That sounds fascinating, and from how you describe it, it also sounds like also a material history of cinema through color and coloring materials, and also placing it alongside several other developments like transportation and automobiles, tourism, and also a shift in frameworks to how to look at places, etc. So it sounds like a very different history. While it is about cinema, it also is sounding to be about a new kind of modern ways of living, arriving just a decade after independence, but also modernism too, not just modernity. So
this is also a period when I had done a lot of reading on infrastructure in the last few years. Now, when we talk about infrastructure, we think about it as the kind of solid way setup that allows things to move. No, but and that we think about infrastructure as a technical system which has no relationship to feelings or dreaming or aesthetics, but I was very influenced by Brian Larkin's work on infrastructure, and there are other people also who have written on infrastructure. The sensory dimension of infrastructure. How do you feel? So when electricity goes, then we recognize there's something wrong with infrastructure. Otherwise, it's a natural thing in our world. So that time I began to realize that the railways, automobility in the highway, aviation, all these transport technologies were key to the way filmmaking was affected. So the railways took people to the hill stations. They introduced them to a kind of tourist context. And this is also the decade where the government of India introduced leave travel concession for government officers so that they would, so it was, the state was inducing a kind of tourism to make people move and travel. And the train becomes important in that context. So all these infrastructures play a very important role in shaping the form of cinema. And yet when we analyze films, we think about film as a director's medium. Okay, let me see what the director has done on screen. Yeah. But I was more interested in the material, cultural transformations that had led up to the formation of a certain kind of cinema. So all these technologies, the chapters are divided according to transport infrastructure. And the last chapter is again on design, in which I look at the whole production of or the orchestration and performance of private property. And what are the elements that go into the making of private property and the wealthy or one scale.
Right. So that sounds like a really fascinating
struggling
project. Also, to shift over, you also have more than 2 decades career in teaching film studies, and you founded the department of the program in cinema studies in JNU at a time when departments were very few in number, and that has really changed now. So what were the challenges of founding a program like that at PhD, MPhil, MA level, postgraduate level programs? What were the challenges of finding the program?
So in JNU, when we started in 2006. And for a long time, we had been trying to, introduce a department. There was only Jadavpur University, which had the film studies department. And then I think Hyderabad came a little later. But they didn't have a full-fledged department until after JNU, I think, if I'm correct. But we should check on that. So when we started, it was just 2 of us, me and Ira Bhaskar, my colleague. We were appointed together in JNU. And we were part of an integrated program. in the School of Arts and Aesthetics, which had visual studies, theatre and performance studies, and cinema studies. So our MA program had to be, our coursework had to be integrated into a program with the other streams. So we decided to introduce students to the language of cinema, questions of genre, film movements, and everything at that MA level. Visual literacy around cinema and how to think about film language, and it was a pontifex. And at the MPhil level, we decided that our field was in a bit of a crisis at that time. By 2006, there was a palpable feeling in the industry, all industries, Hollywood, all the European industry, but Hollywood and Indian film industry. There was a palpable feeling of a sense of crisis that was going to be linked to the end of celluloid and the arrival of the digital. And so these questions were, very, very important. And there was also a recognition that so many other media, the internet had arrived, there were exhibitions spaces had changed, multiplexes had come, DVD circulation had increased. So circulation was as important as production.
Right.
And we can't separate our understanding of how to view films unless we have an understanding of how they move, how they circulate, and what is the infrastructure that makes things move and circulate. So this moment, which was being seen as a kind of new crisis for the field, are we going to deal with celluloid, or are we going to deal with digital television images, etc.? We decided to not deal with this as a crisis, but incorporate the crisis creatively into the discipline and use coursework to frame new questions and have discussions, open-ended discussions, in the class. So in the MPhil, it was possible to do it in the MPhil. That was a very productive program for a long time. In the MPhil, we introduced all these new ways of doing research. How do you research the industry? How do you work on sound? How do you look at film exhibition? How do you follow the biography of a film object? And how do you do archival research about the past when most archival material is absent? When the films are absent, how do you evoke a relationship to a film in the past when the film object is gone, which is the story of so many of these early cinema contexts in the world? How do you engage with all those things? Then we develop new methodologies to think about these questions, and we did it collectively with students. And I must say that the students played a very good role. Every single student brought original primary research. And at that time, we used to go to National Film Archive and introduce them to the archives as well. So the material that was generated that has been generated over the last 15, 18 years from GNU has been this kind of work. And a lot of stuff has been published as articles by the students. Some have become books. And new kinds of ideas have emerged, which broadens the whole question of how to think about.
Right. Now that you have also observed what has happened to cinema studies, film studies, media studies at large, which is not now only limited to film studies courses, but kind of distributed across several humanities and social science courses. As someone who has been observing this, what do you think about, this kind of a very dispersed presence of thinking and studying cinema in the Indian academia? Your broad thoughts on that.
So because of the illusion of reality that cinema invokes, everyone thinks that it's the easiest thing to look at and understand. There's a general feeling, we can all engage with cinema because we watch films.
Yeah.
So we can talk about films and theorize films. And that is a problem, And I don't think that I don't want to have an approach where a discipline starts to control an object and how that object should be viewed. I think it's good that historians and sociologists and anthropologists and literature people
Yeah.
are engaging with cinema. It's good that they're doing it. But the tendency, and this will allow me to present my own approach and argument a little more. The tendency is to focus on
The text only.
the text and narrative,
Right.
plot, characterization, and narrative. It's a story as far as they are concerned. But all the cinematic elements are not being dealt with.
Right.
And for me, it's very important to think about film for what it does and think about it as a technological form, as a medium that has a relationship to music, architecture, theater, literature, all these other things. And it is way beyond narrative because its effects are created in ways that are non-narrative. They're sensory effects. So why is horror possible in the way it is on screen with cinema? And so here I think I have to talk about a very important figure who was inspirational in my thinking as well. That's Tom Gunning and his concept of the cinema of attractions, in which he basically makes an argument that early cinema was not interested in telling stories.
Right.
It was interested in capturing the sensations of urban life, of modernity. So the camera was fascinated with a high-rise building. The camera liked to be on a car and produce movement. So this, and they love the circus. They love spectacle. And so the camera was a organizer of the sensory effects of modern life. And so he calls it the cinema of attractions. And that it's only with the consolidation and rise of Hollywood that the storytelling form narrative becomes important, and the attractions are integrated into the narrative. The narrative becomes the coherent structure that attracts all these sensory dimensions. And in the Indian case, it was particularly interesting because we had music, we had songs, and the songs were always attractions, and they were woven into the film narrative as a series of attractions. So the attractions that's why I think that Indian cinema audiences are very open-minded to experimentation.
Right.
Because they have always watched a cinema that was that had incorporated all kinds of things. And it was that kind of, setup of plural influences that was important in the context of thinking about the discipline. And these are issues that were important in my own course on cinema and the city, but we also taught students at the master's level. And to all literature students, when they came, we said, you have to unlearn literature if you want to understand cinema, because you have to really have that ability to see how it affects people in a sensory way. And what you think is irrelevant, what is there in the backdrop, is very much part of the way in which meaning is being produced. So it's important to understand how the image is assembled, which I will be speaking about today.
Right.
How the image is assembled and put together and layered. And those issues are very important. So while I'm very happy that people in other disciplines should talk about cinema, but the discipline itself should also have space. Say, communicate with the other disciplines so that we can rid the other disciplines of the sense that you just need to watch a film and that's enough to do your research and writing about.
Right. Yeah. Thomas Elsassar also says, cinema is an event, not just a text. And right. So, Ranjani, you have watched, not just watched, but also kind of paid close attention to, read closely, different kinds of genres within this broad category of city films, right? Low budget, horror, all other kinds of, this very lavish interior-based films. So, there's a number of city films that you have watched. And of course, in your first book and in many of your writings, many of these films have come up. I just wonder whether, you could talk about some of the films which you found important, interesting, rich for analytical, purpose.
So I will say that when I was in school in the 70s, I was born in 63 and 70s I was in school, and that was the period where Amitabh Bachchan became a very big star in that age. And don't forget that I grew up in a Bengali family, right? And everyone used to just trash Hindi films and say, this is all nonsense, etc. But when Amitabh Bachchan made his entry in the film industry and he became an important figure, everyone recognized him to be a significant actor. He's a remarkable actor. But my largely adversarial approach with many members of my family at that time, though I've now convinced them the other way around by now, at that time was to defend the popular and say that this is what the masses watch and this is what, there's a kind of connection with ordinary people. So obviously something of the childhood, because I watched all these films. I ran away from school to watch Muqaddar Ka Sikandar. I was suspended for a week for doing that as well. But that kind of madness, I've seen that madness. I have felt that madness of wanting to go for the first day first show. We bought tickets in black and watched all these things at that time. So that stayed with me. And when the opportunity came to turn this into a kind of academic project, this was it, because in some ways it is part of my embodied experience of going to the theaters, watching films with people, and what the popular allowed all of us to do was to dream of everything and anything under
Kinds of
under the sun.
aspirations, right?
It allowed you to dream and all. So then, of course, it became very, very important. And then the 80s happened. And in the 1980s, late 70s onwards, I remember I saw Manthan when it was released in the theater because of my sisters. They took me to see the film. I was still in school at that time. It was, I think, released in 77 or 78. And so in the 80s, when I joined Jamia Mass Communication Center, then suddenly there was this thing, okay, now we have to look at all kinds of films, and then paid much more attention to other kinds of cinemas, including those of the Indian New Wave. And, we'd all watched, I saw Garam Hawa, I even saw the experimental films of Mani Kaul and Kumar Sani. We saw documentaries by Anand Patwardhan, and also urban films that were emerging from Calcutta, like Mrinal Sen, Ray's Cinema. They were all films that we watched during the 80s. And Khatak was somebody who really appeared on the horizon in the 1980s because there was an festival in IIC that we all attended and watched. So there was a whole mood for good cinema, new kinds of cinema. And it was also related to film festival culture. The film festival was always held in Delhi. So that was the atmosphere. And I remember that my positions kept changing as a result, where I don't participate in this, what I consider to be a facile debate between the popular versus the art cinema. I think the world is full of different kinds of cinemas, and we should engage with all kinds of films. And if that is the case, the frameworks have to obviously shift a little, depending on whether you're looking at a large-scale industrial form or you're looking at the work of an auteur and a smaller budget form. So those kinds of things, of course, change. So this change happened over a period of time. My work is not divorced from my own personal experiences of seeing films, seeing how exhibition changed, being fascinated by stars. Who can deny that? Those things were very much part of my early days, even in the academy. But from there, I have now come to a completely different position where stars don't interest me at all in that sense anymore. For a short while, I was interested in Shah Rukh Khan, but more as a phenomena.
Right.
In relation to all
Not
that is
really a
happening
star
in
in-
India
yeah.
today, I was more interested in him as a phenomena. So I wrote about Pathan,
Right.
not as a great film or anything, but what was the phenomena
Right.
around the release of Pathan and Jawan and everything. That was very important. And I got other people to write on it as well. I think you also wrote on
Yeah, I did on Pathan.
Pathan. So I'm interested in all this, and I'm interested in film as an event. So for me, Pathan was an event. After 4 years of no film, he comes back with a bang at a time when things are not
Right.
good in the country, and that for me was a major event. So those are interesting things, and I think the popular continues to play that kind of role in the public domain
Right.
because it's a form so many people are watching. So that kind of it triggers conversations, conflicts, etc. So those kinds of things continue to happen even now.
So since we talked about Pathan and Jawan and this, so you're also observing these changes and so on. There is a, especially post-pandemic and the OTT platforms, films moving to OTT platforms and sometimes being made for OTT platforms, etc. There is this, new ways in which films also appeal to a pan-Indian audience, and some films are considered to be pan-Indian by definition, the way in which they imagine their address to the audience, etc. So, wonder whether you have any thoughts on this kind of, which also sometimes include a very big budget of 100 crores, 200 crores. So, there are multiple new things happening post-pandemic in the broader film industries around the country. So, just if you will
See, now what the kind of filmmaking that you have, and it's a kind of corporatized structure, but it started some years ago. The kind of big budget films where the minting money, what we refer to as big blockbuster films, were driven by big stars because they would attract the audiences immediately into the theater. So there we had a lot of those kinds of films to make money. And at the end of the day, filmmaking is a very expensive craft. And it's part of big business. It's a kind of the logic of capitalism where the desire to create surplus drives a lot of the decision making as well. So in that sense, filmmaking the spectaculars became very important in the last 15 years or so. But what has happened post COVID, while you've had big hits like Pathan and Jawan and other Animal, all these films have been very big hits, but they are rare. And a few hits doesn't mean that the industry is having a healthy time. Because most in the industry continue to be unemployed and they are still facing a crisis because what has happened is that the industry has got monopolized. Production has got monopolized by a few who can afford the big stars. And it is this that started this surge of location shooting abroad, Action films, earlier song sequences were shot abroad. But that has changed. That big action sequences have to be shot in the Arctic Circle or, the deserts of some exotic place. So travel becomes part of this. And they're always looking for ways to manage the production on a scale that was unimaginable earlier. It is huge. The scale of expense involved and the number of people who are involved in the production, distribution, special effects, everything. So it's a much wider template. And so I think that this relationship with the South, because of OTT in this part of in the North Indian context, and filmmaking has changed a little bit. And Whereas the southern films still have a kind of mass appeal and a mass form when they release,
Right.
So this relationship is a very precarious relationship and a tenuous one because Bombay wants to ride on
Hmm.
the secure place that the South Indian films have still
Right.
with their audiences and to make then a form which would do well both in the South and
Right.
the North because
Hmm.
things have changed. And
Hmm.
this is linked particularly to a form that will appeal in theaters.
Hmm.
Because I don't know when I went last to a theater to see a film.
Hmm.
So they're trying to bring people back to theater. I don't think this is going to continue for long because
Hmm.
it will be a novelty to go to
Right.
the theater and watch a film. And there'll be spectacular 3D, hyper use of special effects. Those are the films that will be shown in theater or some other, award-winning films once in a while. And so this period has also seen a revival of older films and classics that have been restored and they've come back to the theaters. And I saw Amrao Jahan, the restored version. But I believe the Gurudutt films had quite a lot of younger people who had come to see the film. So
The remaster.
the remastered, so Sai Bibi or Gulam and Kaagaz Ke Phool got a lot of audience
Right.
in Delhi.
Right.
So things are changing. It's in a flux. Futurist cinema is not clear at all at the moment.
So on that cautious note, I think we can end the conversation for now. Thank you, Ranjini, for being part of the conversation.
Thanks, Nelu.